I can't believe he had the audacity to say that to me.
The arrogant husband said to his wife, "You'll have to accept my mistress living with us, sweetheart." What he didn't expect was that. Hey there, grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. Rebecca Morgan carefully adjusted the Christmas ornaments in the elegant living room, trying to make everything perfect. 15 years of marriage to Daniel had taught her that he valued perfection above all else. The two-story mansion in the affluent suburb was too spacious for just two people, but Daniel had always insisted they needed a house that reflected his status as one of the city's most successful corporate attorneys. At 42, Rebecca maintained her impeccable appearance. Shoulder-length brown hair, always well cut, subtle makeup that enhanced her green eyes, and a wardrobe that Daniel approved of. She had abandoned her promising career as a university literature professor when they married, yielding to his arguments that a successful lawyer's wife should devote herself entirely to the home and social events that promoted his career. "These social gatherings are investments, Becky," Daniel would say. "A good wife is an invaluable asset for a man like me." Rebecca glanced at the wall clock, almost 7 in the evening. Daniel was more than 2 hours late. In recent months, this had become common. Unanswered calls, vague excuses about extended meetings and demanding clients. The carefully prepared dinner was cooling in the kitchen. Sitting on the sofa, Rebecca flipped through some old photographs. She remembered meeting Daniel in college. He, an ambitious and charming law student. She, passionate about English literature and dreaming of teaching. They had been happy at first. When did things start to change? Perhaps when they moved into this huge house 5 years ago, and Daniel began working more and more. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello?" Rebecca answered. "Rebecca, darling, how are you?" It was Melissa, her best friend since college, and the only person who truly knew the cracks in Rebecca's seemingly perfect marriage. "I'm fine, Mel. Just waiting for Daniel to get home from work." "Working late again?" Melissa's voice carried a suspicion that Rebecca tried to ignore. "You know how it is for lawyers at the end of the year," Rebecca replied, but without conviction. "Becky, we need to talk. I have something to tell you, and I don't know how to do this." Melissa's tone made Rebecca feel a knot in her stomach. "What is it, Mel?" "It's not something to discuss over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow for coffee?" "Sure. The usual place at 10? "Perfect. And Becky, try not to worry until then, okay?" But those words had exactly the opposite effect. After hanging up, Rebecca grew even more restless. The sound of the garage door finally announced Daniel's arrival. He entered, loosening his expensive tie. Tall, with gray hair at the temples that gave him a distinguished look at 47, Daniel projected authority and success. "Still up?" he asked, placing his leather briefcase on the sideboard. "I made dinner. It's in the kitchen. I can heat it up," Rebecca offered. "I already ate at the office with some clients," he replied distractedly, pouring himself a whiskey. She noticed a faint aroma of women's perfume as he passed by. "Daniel," Melissa called. "She wants to meet with me tomorrow." He mumbled without interest. "I have to travel to Boston tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday." "Another trip? That's the 3rd one this month." Daniel stared at her coldly. "What are you implying, Rebecca?" "I'm working to maintain all this." He gestured around. "To maintain your comfortable lifestyle." Rebecca sighed. "I'm not implying anything. I just miss you. I'm tired. I'll sleep in the guest room so I don't wake you when I leave before dawn." As she watched Daniel climb the stairs, Rebecca felt the weight of loneliness in her marriage. What did Melissa want to tell her? Why did she have that feeling that her life was about to crumble? The coffee shop downtown was busy the next morning. Rebecca chose a table in the corner, where she and Melissa could talk privately. Her fingers drummed nervously on the coffee cup as she waited. The meeting with Melissa had made her anxious all night, robbing her of sleep. Melissa arrived punctually, as always. With her short blonde hair and casual clothes, she was the opposite of the always formal style Rebecca had adopted to please Daniel. A university professor, the career Rebecca had abandoned, Melissa lived a free and independent life that sometimes made Rebecca question her own choices. "Sorry for all the mystery," Melissa said, after placing her order and settling in, "but I needed to see you in person." "You're scaring me, Mel," Rebecca replied, trying to smile. "What could be so serious?" Melissa took a deep breath and held Rebecca's hands across the table. "I was at the Valley Park Shopping Center yesterday, the one near the highway exit." Rebecca nodded. It was a luxury mall she rarely visited, as it was on the other side of town. "I saw Daniel there," Melissa continued hesitantly. "He wasn't alone, Becky." A heavy silence fell between them as Rebecca absorbed those words. Part of her already knew what would come next. He was with a woman, young, maybe about 30, and it didn't look like a work meeting. Melissa squeezed Rebecca's hands. They were intimate, going into the Tiffany's jewelry store together. Rebecca pulled her hands back and held her coffee cup firmly. The suspicions she had tried to ignore for months now took concrete form. The frequent delays, the business trips, the perfume that wasn't hers, the guest rooms. "Are you sure it was him?" she asked weakly, though she knew it was a foolish question. "Absolutely. I wanted to call you right away, but I felt I should tell you in person." Melissa hesitated. They seemed very comfortable with each other, as if it wasn't the first time. The tears Rebecca had been trying to hold back began to silently flow. "I've suspected for some time, but I didn't want to believe it," she confessed. "I always thought if I worked hard enough to be the perfect wife—" "This has nothing to do with you," Melissa interrupted firmly. "Nothing justifies what he's doing." Rebecca nodded, but years of insecurities planted by Daniel weren't easy to overcome. He would always comment when she didn't meet his expectations, subtly undermining her confidence over the years. "What are you going to do now?" Melissa asked. "He said he'd be in Boston until Friday," Rebecca replied, wiping away her tears. "But that's probably a lie. You deserve better than this, Becky." Melissa hesitated before continuing. "For months I've wanted to tell you. I think Daniel has isolated you. You gave up your career, your friends, your dreams. When was the last time you did something you truly enjoy?" The words hit Rebecca like a punch. It was true. In recent years, her life revolved solely around Daniel and his expectations. Even her clothes, her hair, her home, everything was chosen to project the image he desired. "I'm going to confront him," Rebecca suddenly decided. "When he returns, I deserve to know the truth." "Do you want me to come with you?" Melissa offered. Rebecca shook her head. "I need to do this alone, but thank you for telling me, as painful as it is." Upon returning home, Rebecca walked through the rooms of the mansion with new eyes. The house that Daniel called our dream had never really been hers. She opened the closet in the master bedroom and saw Daniel's clothes, all impeccable, organized by color and occasion. Her own clothes followed the same pattern, but not by her own choice. In Daniel's office, she sat in his leather chair. He never touched his documents, respecting his private space. But now, the rules had changed. She opened the desk drawers and found credit card statements that Daniel never showed her. Expensive restaurants, hotels, jewelry. Expenses that clearly weren't for her. In the last drawer, she found something that made her heart sink even further. A lease agreement for a luxury apartment downtown, signed 8 months ago. The tenant's name? Amber Stevens. In that moment, Rebecca felt something beyond the pain of betrayal. She felt anger. Anger at Daniel for his betrayal, but mostly anger at herself for becoming so dependent, so submissive, for accepting for so long to be less than who she was. When the phone rang, she saw Daniel's name on the caller ID. She took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, dear," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "How's Boston?" "Boston?" Daniel replied after a short pause. "Oh, yes. Everything's going well here. Productive meetings." Rebecca gripped the phone, noticing his hesitation. Through the office window, she could see the sunset painting the sky in orange hues, reflecting the fire now growing inside her. "That's good. And when exactly are you coming back?" she asked, keeping her voice calm while holding the lease agreement with Amber's name. "As I told you, Friday morning." "Why? Do you need something?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "Actually, yes. We need to talk when you get back. It's important." "Did something happen?" Daniel's tone changed to slight irritation. "If it's about renovating the garden, we can discuss that later. I'm busy now." "It's not about the garden," Rebecca replied. "It's about Amber Stevens." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Who?" he finally said, but his voice betrayed him. "We'll have this conversation face to face, Daniel. On Friday." Rebecca hung up before he could respond. Her hands were trembling, but a strange sense of power was overtaking her. For the first time in years, she was taking control of her life. She rose from the chair and went to the master bedroom. She opened her jewelry box and took out the wedding ring Daniel had given her on their 10th anniversary, an ostentatious diamond that he had chosen to show off his success, not for its romantic significance. That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. Instead, she immersed herself in the past, reviewing photos and memories from her college days. She found her master's thesis in English literature that had received honorable mention, work she was genuinely proud of. She remembered how she shined in the classroom, the respect of students, the passion for the profession she had abandoned. The next morning, she called Melissa. "I know who she is," she said, as soon as her friend answered. "Amber Stevens. He rented an apartment for her 8 months ago." "Oh, Becky." Melissa sighed. "How did you find out?" "I found a contract in his office, and now it all makes sense. The trips, the nights away. I partially confronted him on the phone. We'll talk on Friday when he gets back." "How are you feeling?" Rebecca pondered before answering. "Strangely stronger than I imagined, but also lost. I realized I don't know who I am anymore outside of being Daniel Morgan's wife." "You're Rebecca Palmer before you're Rebecca Morgan," Melissa reminded her, using her maiden name. "The brilliant woman I met in college is still in there." Over the next few days, Rebecca mentally relived each year of her marriage. How had she allowed her identity to be gradually erased? The change had been so subtle, small concessions that seemed reasonable when made in the name of love. Daniel had always known how to manipulate her, making her believe his suggestions were for her own good. "You don't need to work, darling. I want you to enjoy life," he would say. But what he really wanted was control. On Thursday, Rebecca received a message from Daniel informing her that he would return later than planned. On Saturday, not Friday. Another lie. Determined not to wait any longer, Rebecca took Amber's apartment address and drove there. The building was exactly the type of place Daniel admired. Modern, luxurious, discreet. At the reception, she said she was Amber's sister and had forgotten the apartment number. The doorman, unsuspecting, promptly informed her, "Apartment 1402, ma'am." In the elevator, Rebecca questioned what she really intended to do. Confront the mistress? See with her own eyes? Part of her still desperately hoped there was an explanation, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. When she reached the 14th floor, she walked down the silent corridor until she stopped in front of door 1402. She raised her hand to knock, but hesitated upon hearing voices inside. A female laugh, and then, unmistakably, Daniel's voice. "Boston is very cold this time of year," she heard him say sarcastically, followed by more laughter. Rebecca didn't knock. Instead, she slowly backed away. Now she had all the confirmation she needed. In fact, she already had it before coming here. This moment wasn't about Daniel or Amber. It was about her finally facing the truth she had tried to ignore for so long. In the elevator back to the ground floor, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. "I miss you. I'll be home soon." The irony of the message caused silent tears to stream down Rebecca's face, but they were no longer tears of sadness or despair. They were tears of resolution. As she left the building into the evening light, she decided that when Daniel returned home on Saturday, he would find a very different woman than the one he had left. Saturday dawned with a relentless clarity that seemed to expose every shadow in the Morgan home. Rebecca had spent the last 2 days in a state of strange calm, organizing her thoughts and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She meticulously arranged the living room, not to impress Daniel, as she would have done before, but to feel firm on familiar territory. At 9 in the morning, she heard the sound of Daniel's car entering the garage. She sat upright on the sofa, hands firmly crossed in her lap. She wore a simple navy blue pants and blouse ensemble, her own clothes, not chosen by him. Daniel entered carrying his travel bag, looking surprised to find her there. "Good morning. I didn't expect to see you up so early on a Saturday." "We have a pending conversation," Rebecca replied in a firm voice. Daniel sighed, placing his bag on the floor. "If this is about what you mentioned on the phone, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Daniel." Rebecca kept her gaze fixed on his. "I was at Amber Stevens's apartment yesterday." His face hardened. The mask of the dedicated husband instantly disappeared. "You followed me? Invaded my privacy? Funny you should talk about privacy when you've been betraying our trust for at least 8 months." Rebecca shook her head slightly. "Let's not change the focus of the conversation. I want to know how long this has been going on and what you intend to do about it." Daniel slumped into an armchair, suddenly looking tired. He ran his hand through his graying hair, and for the first time, Rebecca noticed how much older he looked. "Amber is a work colleague," he began. "Spare me the lies, Daniel. I saw the lease agreement, I saw the expenses for jewelry and restaurants, and I heard you two together in the apartment." A heavy silence fell over them. Daniel looked at her with an expression Rebecca had never seen before, a mixture of irritation and something that seemed like relief at no longer having to pretend. "Okay, we've been together for almost a year," he finally admitted. "She understands me, Rebecca, understands the pressure of my work, my ambitions. She's 30, also a corporate attorney, building her career. We have a lot in common." Each word was like a knife, but Rebecca remained firm. "And what do you intend to do now?" Daniel's answer caught her completely off guard. "I want her to come live here, with us." Rebecca blinked, uncertain if she had heard correctly. "What?" "I don't want to separate from you, Rebecca. We have a history together, an established life, and I don't want to give up Amber." Daniel leaned forward, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Many modern couples have arrangements like this. You'll have your space, she'll have hers. This house is big enough." The audacity of the proposal left Rebecca momentarily speechless. The pain of betrayal was one thing, but this deliberate humiliation was unbearable. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she finally managed to say, her voice trembling with indignation. "You think I'm going to accept sharing my husband and my home with your mistress?" Daniel shrugged. "I thought you'd like the idea. After all, you've always been so concerned with keeping up appearances. This way, we wouldn't have to face the scandal of a divorce." "You'll have to accept my mistress living with us," the arrogant husband declared to his wife. "Think of it as a practical solution. You maintain your lifestyle, your social position. What else would you do, Rebecca? Go back to teaching? Start over at 42? Rebecca stood up, shaking with anger. "You really think I couldn't survive without you? That I'm that weak and dependent?" "Let's be realistic," Daniel replied with a condescending smile. "You haven't worked in 15 years. You have no income of your own, no separate savings. This house is in my name, as are the cars and investments. What exactly do you have beyond what I've given you?" Those cruel words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. The worst part was that there was truth in them. Daniel had always insisted on maintaining complete financial control, claiming he understood these things better. "I'd rather live under a bridge than accept this humiliating proposal," Rebecca responded, her voice low but filled with fury. "I want a divorce." Daniel laughed, a cold sound Rebecca had never heard before. "Then you'll have your divorce, but don't expect much from it. The prenuptial agreement you signed significantly limits what you can receive." Rebecca felt as if she were seeing Daniel for the first time. Not the man she had fallen in love with, but a calculating and cruel stranger. "Know that I have the best divorce attorney in the city," he continued, standing up. "And in case you haven't noticed, I myself am a rather competent lawyer. I suggest you think carefully before making absurd demands." As he climbed the stairs with his bag, Rebecca remained motionless in the living room, confronting the devastating reality of her situation. She was not only facing the end of her marriage, but also the prospect of a legal battle against a man who knew every trick in the system, a man who clearly wouldn't hesitate to leave her with nothing. The rest of that day passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Daniel left again, coldly announcing he would spend the night at Amber's apartment. "To give you space to think more about my proposal," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alone in the huge, silent house, Rebecca sat in the backyard, watching the sunset. The roses she herself had planted and cared for over the years seemed to belong to another life now, a life that was crumbling before her eyes. The phone rang repeatedly, Melissa trying to make contact, but Rebecca wasn't ready to talk. She needed to organize her thoughts, understand what had happened, and, more importantly, decide what to do next. When night fell completely, she went back into the house and headed to Daniel's office. This time, there was no hesitation in opening drawers and folders. She took photos of documents with her phone, bank statements, investments, the prenuptial agreement he had mentioned. She needed to understand exactly what she was fighting against. Reading the prenuptial agreement by lamplight, Rebecca felt a wave of nausea. The document, signed in her pre-wedding euphoria when she blindly trusted Daniel, effectively left her with very little if they divorced. She would be entitled only to a small temporary alimony and no part of the properties or investments acquired during the marriage. "How could I have been so naive?" she murmured to herself. The next morning, she finally returned Melissa's call. "My God, Becky, I was getting worried. How are you?" Rebecca told her everything. The confrontation, Daniel's absurd proposal, the veiled threat about the divorce. Her voice trembled occasionally, but remained firm. "That bastard!" Melissa exclaimed. "Becky, you need a lawyer, immediately." "I don't have money to hire a good lawyer," Rebecca replied. "The joint account we have is monitored by him. If I withdraw a large amount, he'll know." "I'll lend you the money," Melissa offered without hesitation. "And I know someone, a lawyer who specializes in complex divorces. She worked with a colleague from the department last year, Sarah Patterson. She's known for taking on arrogant lawyers like Daniel." 2 hours later, Rebecca was sitting in Sarah Patterson's discreet office. The attorney, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a confident posture, listened attentively as Rebecca explained her situation. "Unfortunately, cases like yours are more common than I'd like," Sarah commented after examining the copy of the prenuptial agreement Rebecca had brought. "Men in positions of power who financially isolate their wives." "So, there's no hope?" asked Rebecca, feeling defeated. "I wouldn't say that." Sarah adjusted her glasses. "This agreement has questionable points, and more importantly, you've dedicated 15 years of your life to this marriage, abandoned your career at his request. That has value. Additionally, I have some questions. Does Daniel keep office clients as personal clients?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes, he mentions that occasionally. He prides himself on having clients who follow him personally, regardless of which firm he works at." "And does he work at home? Use your residence for business meetings?" "Constantly. We converted the studio into a second office for him, and we host business dinners at home at least twice a month." Sarah took notes. "This could be important. We can argue that the residence functioned partially as a commercial space, and that you directly contributed to his career by maintaining the home and hosting professional events. For the first time in days, Rebecca felt a small flame of hope. "Do you really think we can fight him?" "It will be a battle," Sarah admitted. "Daniel has resources and knows the system, but I know how to handle men like him. They tend to underestimate their female opponents, and that's a mistake we can use to our advantage." Leaving Sarah's office, Rebecca felt different. The pain and humiliation were still there, but now there was also purpose, direction. Melissa was waiting at a nearby cafe. "How did it go?" "She thinks we have a case," Rebecca replied. "It won't be easy, but there are possibilities." "And now? Are you going back home?" Rebecca shook her head. "I can't stay there, Mel. Not after what he said, what he proposed." "Stay with me," Melissa offered instantly. "I have that guest room. You can stay as long as you need while you sort things out. I don't want to impose—" "Rebecca Morgan, stop that right now," Melissa interrupted firmly. "You housed me for 3 months when I broke up with Jeff, and my apartment flooded, remember? Besides, I want you close. I don't trust what Daniel might do." That night, after picking up some clothes and essential items from the mansion while Daniel was still out, Rebecca sat on the small balcony of Melissa's apartment. With a cup of tea in her hands, she contemplated the night sky. "You know what's most frightening?" she said to Melissa, who had joined her. "It's not losing the money or the house. It's realizing that I wasted 15 years with someone who never really loved me, who saw me as property, an accessory." "It wasn't a waste," Melissa replied softly. "It was part of your journey. And now, a new chapter begins." That night, lying in the guest room bed, Rebecca made a decision. She wouldn't just fight for what was financially due to her. She would fight to rediscover who she was, beyond being Daniel Morgan's wife. And above all, she would never again allow anyone to make her feel small. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daniel bombarded Rebecca with messages oscillating between veiled threats and attempts at persuasion. "You're being irrational," said one. "Think about everything you'll lose," warned another. Rebecca, following Sarah's advice, didn't respond to any of them. "Every message from him can be used in the proceedings," Sarah explained during their second meeting. "Let him talk. The more, the better for us." Sarah had developed a meticulous strategy. The first step was to ensure Rebecca had access to sufficient financial resources to sustain herself during the process. "The law requires him to pay for your subsistence and legal expenses during the divorce," Sarah explained, "especially considering the income disparity between you. We'll file for temporary alimony immediately." On the 3rd day away from home, Rebecca received notification that Daniel had emptied their joint account, the little financial access she still had. "Predictable," Sarah commented when Rebecca called in a panic, "and exactly the kind of behavior judges hate. He just gave us more ammunition." Sarah filed an emergency request, and to Rebecca's surprise, the judge quickly ruled in her favor. Daniel was ordered to deposit a significant monthly amount for her expenses and to pay her legal fees. When Rebecca received the first deposit, she felt a strange sense of relief. It was the first time in years she had money that she didn't need to justify to Daniel how she had spent. "This is just the beginning," Sarah assured her. "And I have more interesting news. I've obtained information about Daniel's private clients. It appears he may be diverting clients from the firm where he works without properly documenting it. This could constitute an ethical violation." "How does that help us?" Rebecca asked. "Leverage," Sarah replied with a small smile. "Daniel won't want the firm or the Bar Association investigating his practices. This gives us negotiating power." As the legal battle progressed, Rebecca began rebuilding other aspects of her life. Melissa encouraged her to reconnect with former university colleagues. "The literature department is always looking for substitute professors," she casually commented during dinner. "Director Ann Thompson is still there and always liked you." "Mel, I've been out of academia for 15 years. Nobody will want me. You continued reading and studying on your own all this time." And you have a master's degree with distinction from a respected university. At least, talk to Anne." Reluctantly, Rebecca agreed to call her former mentor. To her surprise, Anne remembered her vividly. "Rebecca Palmer, how wonderful to hear your voice. I always regretted that you left the doctoral program." The conversation flowed easily, and before she knew it, Rebecca was invited for an interview. 2 days later, they offered her a temporary assistant professor position for the semester starting in 3 weeks. "It's not a permanent position," Anne explained, "but if all goes well, it could lead to something more stable, and it would give you time to consider resuming your doctorate." The salary was modest, but it represented something much more valuable: independence, purpose, reconnection with a passion that had been stifled for years. That night, Rebecca received another message from Daniel. "I heard you're teaching now. Pathetic. You won't be able to support yourself with that. I'm still willing to consider a reasonable settlement if you stop this divorce madness." For the first time, his words didn't affect her. Instead of fear or pain, she felt only pity. Pity for a man unable to understand that some things were worth more than money. The next morning, after her first class, Rebecca was surprised to find a small group of students waiting to ask questions. She felt nervous initially, but soon realized she could answer with confidence. The knowledge and passion for the subject were still there, just dormant. "Professor Morgan, your analysis of Jane Austen was fascinating," commented a student, "especially the part about economic and social power structures." "Actually," Rebecca replied with a smile, "it's Professor Palmer now." That simple statement, reclaiming her maiden name, was a deeply symbolic moment. As she left the classroom, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: genuine pride in herself. On her way to Melissa's apartment, she received a call from Sarah. "I have important news," said the attorney. "Amber Stevens is asking for an increase in her allowance and threatening Daniel with some kind of revelation if he doesn't meet her demands. My source at his office says they had a heated argument yesterday." "How does that affect us?" Rebecca asked. "Trouble in paradise means Daniel is more vulnerable, and a vulnerable man makes mistakes." Sarah paused. "We have another hearing next week. We'll be ready." Arriving at the apartment, Rebecca found a bouquet of flowers at the door, not from Daniel, but from her new colleagues in the literature department, with a welcome card. "Looks like someone impressed the department," Melissa commented upon seeing the flowers. "It's strange," Rebecca admitted, touching the delicate petals. "For years, I thought I had nothing to offer beyond being Daniel's wife. How could I forget who I was?" "You didn't forget," Melissa replied gently. "You just got lost for a while, but you're finding your way back." That night, looking around the small apartment where she was now temporarily living, Rebecca realized that, although she was still in the midst of the storm, she had found something precious she thought she had lost forever: hope. The divorce proceedings advanced slowly, with both sides preparing their strategies. Despite the difficulties, Rebecca found comfort in her new routine. Teaching again energized her in a way she had forgotten was possible. Each morning brought a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, after her last class of the day, Rebecca was organizing her notes when she noticed a man standing in the doorway. "Professor Palmer?" he called politely. Rebecca looked up and saw a man of about 45, with brown hair slightly graying at the temples and attentive eyes. He wore a well-tailored suit, but not ostentatious, the kind of discreet elegance that Daniel had always despised for not being impressive enough. "Yes, that's me," she replied, cautious. "Can I help you?" "My name is Michael Hartman," he introduced himself, approaching and extending his hand. "I'm a partner at Pearson & Associates law firm." Rebecca felt a chill down her spine. That name was familiar for a terrible reason. Pearson & Associates was the firm where Daniel worked. "If you're here on behalf of my husband, you should speak with my attorney," she said firmly, taking a step back. Michael shook his head. "I'm not here representing Daniel," he quickly clarified. "In fact, it's the opposite. We need to talk about something important, and I'd prefer it to be in private." After a moment of hesitation, Rebecca decided to hear what he had to say, but suggested the campus cafe, a public place where she would feel safer. Michael readily agreed. Once seated at a discreet table, with steaming cups of coffee in front of them, Michael got straight to the point. "Our firm is conducting an internal investigation into improper conduct," he explained, "specifically about client diversion and possible double billing. Daniel Morgan is the primary focus of this investigation." Rebecca observed him carefully, trying to determine if this was some kind of elaborate trap. "Why are you telling me this? And how did you know where to find me?" As for the second question, it wasn't difficult. "You're listed in the faculty directory." Michael took a sip of coffee. "As for the first, I'm here because we need your help. Daniel kept documents at home, correct? Possibly met with clients there?" "Yes, frequently," Rebecca confirmed. "We converted one of the rooms into an office for him." Michael nodded. "We suspect he has diverted important clients for private consultation, using firm resources and charging fees that should be shared with the firm. If you have any information that could corroborate this—" "Why would I help your firm?" Rebecca interrupted. "What do I gain from this?" Michael smiled slightly. "A fair question. There are two reasons. First, if we prove misconduct, Daniel will face serious professional problems. This could significantly affect his financial position and, consequently, your divorce." He paused. "Second, we're willing to compensate relevant information." Rebecca's heart raced. This could completely change the balance of power in the legal battle she was facing. "I need to consult my attorney before anything," she replied cautiously. "Understandable." Michael slid a card across the table. "My direct contact is there. Please, consider it seriously. This investigation will proceed regardless, but your cooperation could significantly accelerate things." That same evening, Rebecca, Melissa, and Sarah met at the apartment to discuss this new development. "It seems legitimate," Sarah concluded, after hearing everything and verifying Michael's credentials online. "The question is, how involved were you in his home business?" "I organized the dinners, received the clients, but never participated in the actual meetings," Rebecca explained. "However—" "What?" Sarah encouraged. "I scanned many documents for him over the years. I kept his filing system organized until he hired an assistant last year." Rebecca hesitated. "And sometimes I overheard conversations. Daniel could be indiscreet when he thought he was just among friends." Sarah exchanged glances with Melissa. "This could be very valuable." 2 days later, Rebecca met with Michael again, this time with Sarah present. After an hour detailing what she knew, it was clear that her information was exactly what Pearson and Associates was looking for. The following week, Rebecca's life was finally finding a positive rhythm when she received an unexpected call. "Rebecca? It's Amber." The shock of hearing Daniel's mistress's voice almost made Rebecca hang up, but something stopped her. "How did you get my number?" she asked coldly. "From Daniel's phone," Amber replied. "Look, I know you hate me and you have every right, but we need to talk. We have absolutely nothing to talk about. I have information about how Daniel is hiding assets from the divorce proceedings," Amber insisted. "He opened offshore accounts. He's transferring money. A lot of money." Rebecca felt a knot in her stomach. "Why are you telling me this? I thought you two were together." Amber's bitter laugh surprised Rebecca. "We were, until I found out about Jennifer." "Jennifer?" "The other girl. Assistant at his office. Apparently, I'm too old at 30, Amber explained, her voice heavy with resentment. "He promised to leave you for me, you know? And now I've discovered he's making the same promises to her." Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of nausea and anger. One betrayal wasn't enough. Daniel maintained a pattern of continuous deception. "And what do you want in exchange for this information?" Rebecca asked, suspicious. "Nothing. I already got what I wanted from him. Apartment, car, jewelry, gifts are legally mine." The satisfaction in Amber's voice was palpable. "I'm leaving for California next week. But before I go, I want to make sure he pays for lying to both of us." That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The revelation of yet another mistress, the offshore accounts, everything indicated that Daniel was even more manipulative and dishonest than she had imagined. And now she had to decide whether to trust Amber, the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. "Is it a trap?" she asked Melissa the next morning. "Could Daniel be using her to trick me? Or maybe she's really angry about being replaced," Melissa pondered. Betrayed people often want revenge. After consulting with Sarah, Rebecca agreed to meet Amber at a neutral restaurant. The woman she had imagined so many times was different than she expected. Younger than her sophisticated clothes suggested, with an air of toughness that spoke of someone accustomed to fighting for what she wanted. "Here," said Amber, sliding a flash drive across the table. "I copied documents from his computer, bank statements, emails about transfers. He thinks I'm stupid, that I only care about expensive gifts." Rebecca looked at the flash drive, feeling the weight of her decision. "Why should I believe you?" Amber leaned forward. "Because we were both deceived by the same man. The difference is that I found out before wasting 15 years of my life." Her gaze softened momentarily. "And because, strange as it seems, I think you deserve better." The flash drive Amber provided turned out to be a goldmine of information. Sarah called an emergency meeting with Rebecca and a financial expert to analyze the documents. "This is absolutely incriminating," stated Julian Wheeler, the forensic accountant Sarah had hired. "Daniel transferred more than $2 million to accounts in the Cayman Islands over the last 8 months, clearly trying to hide assets from the divorce proceedings." Sarah nodded, flipping through the printed documents. "And these communications with the bank manager, he explicitly mentions keeping the funds protected during the divorce. There's no ambiguity." Rebecca observed the pile of evidence with a sense of unreality. The extent of Daniel's dishonesty was shocking, even after everything she had already discovered. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Two things simultaneously," Sarah replied. "First, we present this to the court as evidence of concealment of assets. This can result in severe penalties for Daniel, possibly even the complete reversal of the prenuptial agreement due to bad faith. Second, we share this information with Michael Hartman at Pearson & Associates, strengthening their internal investigation." 2 days later, Daniel Morgan's world began to crumble. The court issued an asset freeze order after evidence of concealment. Simultaneously, Pearson & Associates summoned him for an emergency meeting of the Board of Partners. Rebecca didn't directly witness these events, but received updates from Michael and Sarah. Daniel, apparently, reacted with his usual arrogance, initially denying everything until confronted with irrefutable evidence. "He's panicking," Michael reported after the firm meeting. "He's been temporarily removed from his duties while the investigation continues, and frankly, his situation doesn't look good at all." In court, things weren't any better for Daniel. The judge, visibly irritated by the concealment tactics, ordered a complete review of all the couple's assets and appointed an independent administrator to supervise the process. The morning after the judicial decision, Rebecca received an unexpected call from Daniel. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of its usual confidence. "In private." Rebecca hesitated. "Any communication should go through our lawyers now." "Please, Rebecca," he insisted, and for the first time in their marriage, she heard something she never expected from Daniel Morgan. Pleading. 15 minutes, at the cafe near the university. After consulting Sarah, who advised caution but didn't forbid the meeting, Rebecca agreed. When she arrived at the cafe, she found a man very different from the confident, controlling husband she had known. Daniel seemed to have aged years in weeks, deep circles under his eyes, defeated posture, his arrogance replaced by an almost desperate expression. "Thank you for coming," he said when she sat down. "I know I don't deserve your time." "What do you want, Daniel?" Rebecca asked, keeping her voice firm despite the strangeness of seeing him so dejected. "I want to propose a settlement," he replied, looking nervously around as if afraid of being watched. outside the courts, something more generous than the judge will probably determine. Rebecca studied him carefully. Why would you do that now? Because I'm finished professionally, Daniel admitted with a heavy sigh. Pearson is kicking me out. The Bar Association is investigating possible ethical violations. If this goes to criminal trial, he didn't complete the sentence, but the implication was clear. How much? Rebecca asked directly. Half of everything, Daniel offered. The house, the investments, everything. I'll split everything 50-50, including what I tried to hide. Rebecca allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The man who had tried to leave her with nothing was now offering half of everything. Not out of generosity, clearly, but out of desperation. Why should I trust you now? Because I don't have any more cards up my sleeve, he replied simply. Amber betrayed me. The firm betrayed me. I'm cornered. Amber didn't betray you, Rebecca calmly corrected. She just did what you would do if the situation were reversed. And as for the firm, they just discovered you were stealing from them. Daniel lowered his head without arguments. I'll consult my attorney, said Rebecca, standing up, but know that any agreement will have to be completely transparent and legally binding. Leaving the cafe, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing Daniel destroyed, just a melancholy for the waste of so many years, for what could have been if he were the man she thought she had married. On her way home, she stopped at a park and sat on a bench, watching families and couples strolling under the autumn sun. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry openly, not for the end of the marriage, but mourning a dream that had never been real. That night, she reported the meeting to Sarah, who was surprised by the offer. He must be really desperate, the attorney commented. Half the assets would be more than we'd probably get even with all the evidence. And you think I should accept? Rebecca asked. Sarah considered carefully. From a strictly financial standpoint, it's a good offer. It avoids months or years of legal battles. But the final decision is yours. What do you feel you need to move forward? Rebecca reflected on the question for several days, weighing not only the financial aspects, but also the emotional cost of remaining tied to Daniel through a prolonged process. Her answer came during a conversation with a colleague from the literature department, Professor James Harrington, a gentleman in his 50s who had been extraordinarily welcoming since her return to the university. Revenge seems sweet when we're hurt, he observed, when Rebecca, without revealing details, mentioned being at a crossroads between accepting a settlement or fighting for more. But it tends to be a slow poison for those who seek it. Sometimes, true power lies in moving forward. Those words resonated deeply. The next morning, Rebecca communicated her decision to Sarah. She would accept the settlement, with clear conditions and solid legal guarantees. She wanted to turn the page. The true victory wouldn't be extracting every last penny from Daniel, but rebuilding her life on her own terms. 3 weeks later, after intense negotiations between the attorneys, the agreement was finalized. Rebecca would receive the house, which she decided to sell, half of all investments and financial assets, and an additional amount as compensation for the years dedicated to Daniel's career. The total value was substantial, more than enough to ensure her financial stability and allow her to complete her doctorate, if she wished. When they signed the final documents in the presence of the attorneys, it was the first time Rebecca had seen Daniel since their meeting at the cafe. He looked even more defeated, avoiding her gaze. I hope this brings some peace to both of us, Rebecca said politely after the signing. Daniel finally looked into her eyes. I'm sorry, he murmured, words she never expected to hear from him. For everything. Rebecca nodded, without offering explicit forgiveness, but feeling the weight of resentment beginning to dissipate. Not for him, but for herself. Leaving the office, she breathed deeply in the fresh afternoon air. A painful chapter was coming to an end, but other, promising ones were just beginning. The following months brought a series of positive changes to Rebecca's life. With the resources from the divorce settlement, she decided to sell the mansion that had never truly felt like her home. The process of emptying the house was therapeutic, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to simply leave behind. "It's strange," she commented to Melissa as they organized boxes in the spacious living room. "I lived here for years, but there are so few things that really mean something to me." "Yun, because this house was Daniel's dream, not yours," Melissa replied, helping to pack some books Rebecca had decided to keep. Mainly literature works she had secretly collected over the years, hiding them on the guest room bookshelf. With the money from the sale, Rebecca bought an elegant two-bedroom apartment near the university. It was much smaller than the mansion, but every inch reflected her own choices and her newly discovered sense of style. Walls in soft shades of blue, shelves filled with books, comfortable furniture chosen for practicality rather than appearance. Everything breathed authenticity. Professionally, things were also progressing. At the end of the semester as a temporary professor, the department offered her a permanent position as an assistant professor. "Your students love your classes," explained Ann Thompson, now department head. "And your perspective on 19th century women's literature is truly refreshing. Besides," she added with a smile, "it would be wonderful if you considered resuming your doctorate with us." Rebecca accepted the offer enthusiastically. Teaching had rekindled her passion for literature in a way she hadn't expected. Seeing students get excited about Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters, debating interpretations of classic texts, all of this brought a deep satisfaction that the role of successful lawyer's wife had never provided. Meanwhile, news about Daniel occasionally reached her. His legal career was effectively over in Boston. The Bar Association's investigation had resulted in a temporary suspension of his license, and no respectable firm would accept him with such a background. According to rumors, he had moved to Tampa, Florida, to start over at a smaller firm, far from the prestige he so valued. As for Amber, Rebecca learned through mutual contacts that she had indeed moved to California, apparently using Daniel's gifts to open a small boutique in San Diego. Jennifer, the other mistress, had completely disappeared from the radar. On a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Rebecca was enjoying tea on the balcony of her new apartment when she received an unexpected text message. "I'm in town for a few days. Can we have coffee? No agenda. Just to see how you're doing. Daniel." Rebecca contemplated the phone for long minutes. She no longer felt anger or acute resentment, just an emotional distance that seemed appropriate. After careful consideration, she replied, "Sorry, my schedule is very busy this week with the end of the semester. I wish you all the best." That simple refusal, polite but firm, represented a milestone in her recovery journey. There was no longer any need for confrontation or settling scores. Daniel simply no longer occupied a significant place in her life. In the following weeks, Rebecca began to notice a subtle change in her interaction with James Harrington, the older professor who had helped her readjust to the academic environment. What had begun as a professional friendship was evolving into something warmer. Small gestures, a coffee left on her desk before the first class, long conversations about literature that extended well beyond working hours, the way his eyes lit up when she entered the faculty lounge. "I think James is interested in you," Melissa commented after they had dinner together, and met James, who briefly joined them for coffee. "You think?" Rebecca felt a slight blush on her cheeks. "He's just kind to everyone." "Not the way he is with you," Melissa insisted with a smile. "And to be honest, I've never seen your eyes shine like that when talking about someone." It was true that Rebecca felt extraordinarily comfortable in James's presence. At 55, he had a calmness and gentleness that contrasted strongly with Daniel's ambitious intensity. Widowed for 5 years, James spoke openly about his late wife and the loving relationship they had, without excessive melancholy, just with respectful longing. "She taught me that true love is giving freedom, not restricting," he commented once during lunch. "I think that's why I never tried to stop her from accepting that job in Paris, even knowing it would be difficult for us." Words that resonated deeply with Rebecca, reminding her of how Daniel had always used love as a justification to control her. At a departmental workshop a few weeks later, Rebecca and James were assigned to work together on an interdisciplinary course project. After a productive afternoon developing the curriculum, James hesitated as they said goodbye. "Rebecca, I know this may seem inappropriate, considering we're colleagues and you've recently gone through a complicated divorce, but—" He paused, clearly nervous. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow? Not as colleagues, but as a date." James's direct honesty, his vulnerability in making the invitation, touched Rebecca deeply. There were no power games or manipulation in his words. "I'd love to," she replied sincerely. The dinner was wonderful, a fluid conversation about books, music, life experiences. James was an excellent listener, genuinely interested in her opinions and feelings. To Rebecca's surprise, she found herself sharing parts of her experience with Daniel that she had mentioned only to Melissa. "I think the hardest thing was realizing how I allowed my own identity to be gradually erased," she confessed, "as if I had forgotten who I was before being the wife of." James nodded understandingly. Unbalanced relationships do that. One partner absorbs the other's light until almost nothing remains. "But now I feel like I'm finding my way back," Rebecca concluded with a small smile. "Or maybe discovering a completely new path." "And you're doing it brilliantly," James replied, his eyes reflecting genuine admiration. In the following months, the relationship gradually flourished. James never pressured, always respecting the pace Rebecca set. Slowly, she rediscovered parts of herself that had been suppressed during the marriage. Her witty sense of humor, her passion for outdoor walks, her talent for watercolor painting that she had abandoned because Daniel considered it a purposeless hobby. During one of these weekend walks, they stopped to rest at a viewpoint overlooking the city. Autumn had painted the trees in vibrant shades of red and gold, an appropriate metaphor for the transformation in her own life. "You know," said James, gently holding her hand, "when Catherine lost her battle with cancer, I thought I would never find this kind of connection with someone again, that this part of my life was over." Rebecca squeezed his hand gently. "I know what it's like to feel that a door has permanently closed. But then you appeared, with your resilience and your determination to rebuild." James smiled, and I realized that sometimes, when a door closes, it's not the end of the journey. It's just a change in direction. In that serene moment, with the city below them and the expansive sky above, Rebecca felt a sense of completeness that she had thought forever lost. Not because James completed her in the cliched romantic sense, but because she had found the balance between genuine intimacy and personal independence, something her marriage to Daniel had never offered. "We're two complete adults choosing to walk together," she said softly, "instead of one trying to possess or control the other." "Exactly," James replied, "and that's how it should be." That night, returning to her cozy apartment, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary transformation her life had undergone in just 1 year, from the initial humiliation and despair to renewed independence and the possibility of authentic love. The journey hadn't been easy, but each difficult step had led her exactly where she needed to be. 2 years had passed since the fateful day when Daniel made his humiliating proposal. It was a sunny spring morning, and Rebecca was adjusting her graduation cap in the bedroom mirror. At 44, she had finally completed her doctorate in English literature. The defense of her thesis on power, submission, and female liberation in Jane Austen's novels had not only been approved, but praised by the committee as a significant contribution to the field. "You're radiant," said James, appearing at the door with a coffee cup in each hand. After a year of dating, they had decided to move in together 6 months ago. The relationship continued to flourish, based on mutual respect and genuine admiration. "I'm nervous," Rebecca confessed, accepting the coffee. "Speaking to all those students and families. And you'll be brilliant, as always." James smiled. The woman who challenged Daniel Morgan and rebuilt her life from scratch won't be intimidated by a graduation speech. Rebecca laughed, recognizing the truth in his words. She had been invited to speak as the representative of the graduate students, an honor that reflected not only her exceptional academic performance, but also the respect she had earned among colleagues and professors. On campus, the chairs arranged on the central lawn were being occupied by enthusiastic family members. Melissa was in the front row, waving excitedly. Next to her, to Rebecca's surprise, was Sarah Patterson, the attorney who had become a close friend throughout the process. The ceremony proceeded with traditional pomp until Rebecca was called to the podium. Standing before the crowd, she felt a serenity that came from the awareness of her own worth. "When I began this academic journey 2 years ago, I was also beginning a personal journey of rediscovery," she began. "Many of us reach crucial moments in life where we are confronted with a fundamental choice: to remain in situations that diminish us, out of fear of the unknown, or to take a leap of faith toward our own truth and potential." The words flowed naturally as she shared, without specific details, the essence of her personal transformation alongside the academic one. There is a line in Jane Austen's Persuasion that says, "Just do not tell me to give up because of pride, chances of happiness, and fear of what others will decide." These words became my mantra when facing my own fears and uncertainties. Looking at the sea of attentive faces, Rebecca concluded, "The education we received here goes far beyond books and theories. We learned to question, to challenge assumptions, to find our own voice. And perhaps this is the most valuable lesson of all, that it is never too late to rewrite our own story." The enthusiastic applause that followed warmed her heart. As she returned to her seat, she glimpsed a familiar face at the back of the audience, Daniel. The initial shock quickly gave way to a curious tranquility. He looked different, thinner, with more gray hair, wearing a suit that, although expensive, didn't have the same air of ostentation as before. After the ceremony, while receiving hugs and congratulations from friends and colleagues, she noticed Daniel hesitantly approaching. "Congratulations, Rebecca," he said, maintaining a respectful distance. It was a powerful speech. "Thank you," she replied with neutral politeness. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm in Boston for some meetings," Daniel explained. "I saw the announcement of the ceremony in the newspaper and—" He hesitated. "I wanted to see how you were doing." Rebecca observed him with interest. There was a genuine vulnerability in his eyes that she had never seen during their marriage. "I'm doing very well, as you can see," she replied sincerely. "Yes, you are." Daniel nodded. "You look happy, fulfilled." "I am." An uncomfortable silence followed, until Daniel spoke again. "I lost everything, you know. The Florida firm didn't work out. The tarnished reputation followed me. Amber took half of what I had left. And Jennifer," he shook his head. "Let's just say she found someone more promising when she learned I didn't have as much to offer anymore." Rebecca felt no satisfaction at his misfortune, only a distant compassion. "I'm sorry for your difficulties, Daniel." "Don't be." He gave a sad smile. "In a way, I needed to lose everything to see how empty it all was. How empty I was." At that moment, James approached, gently placing his arm around Rebecca's waist. "Is everything okay here?" "Everything's great," Rebecca assured him. "James, this is Daniel. Daniel, this is James Harrington, my partner." The two men exchanged a brief greeting. The contrast between them could not have been more evident. Daniel, still attractive, but with the shine of excessive confidence dimmed. James, with his calm and secure presence that didn't need to impose itself. "You two look very good together," Daniel commented, and to Rebecca's surprise, he seemed sincere. He hesitated again. "I really messed everything up, didn't I?" We had something good, and I devalued it. I treated you like a possession, not like a partner." "Yes," Rebecca simply agreed, "but that's in the past now." Daniel nodded, accepting the truth in her words. "Well, I don't want to interrupt your celebration. Just take care of her," he said to James. "She deserves someone who recognizes her worth." "That I know," James replied with a slight smile. "And she doesn't need anyone to take care of her. She's perfectly capable of taking care of herself." The comment drew a genuine smile from Rebecca. It was exactly this understanding that made her relationship with James work, the recognition of her independence, not as a threat, but as a fundamental part of who she was. Daniel nodded slightly and walked away. Rebecca watched him leave, feeling finally free of the last vestige of resentment that might have remained. The celebration continued with dinner at Rebecca's favorite restaurant, surrounded by true friends. Melissa was radiant by her side. Sarah shared stories of other inspiring cases. Department colleagues enthusiastically discussed future plans. It was a community that Rebecca had built on her own merit, not as an appendage to someone else's life. Later that night, walking hand in hand with James under the starry sky, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary turnaround in her life. "You know what's most surprising?" she commented. "When Daniel made that absurd proposal to me, I thought it was the end of the world, that I would never recover from that humiliation. And look at you now," James replied. "Dr. Palmer, respected professor, published author." Rebecca smiled, thinking about the book based on her thesis that would be released next month. "I think, ironically, I should thank him. If Daniel hadn't been so arrogant, maybe I would never have found the courage to start over." "Sometimes we need a push to get us out of situations that no longer serve us," James agreed, "even if it's a painful push." Arriving home, Rebecca paused a moment on the porch to admire the full moon. She remembered all the nights she had spent alone in the Morgan mansion, feeling small and inadequate. What a contrast to the woman she had become, confident, fulfilled, loved not for her usefulness to someone, but for her essence. The journey had been difficult, but each obstacle overcome had strengthened her. Each challenge had taught her more about her own capacity for adaptation and growth. Daniel's betrayal, which once seemed like a sentence to unhappiness, had actually revealed itself as the catalyst for her liberation. As she entered the warmth of the home she had built with James, a home of equality and mutual respect, Rebecca carried with her a serene certainty that true happiness was not in being someone's perfect wife, but in being authentically herself, and that she would never again allow anyone to diminish her light or question her worth. The humiliating proposal Daniel had made 2 years ago wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a new and much more satisfying one. A story where she, finally, was the author of her own destiny. If you've made it this far and Rebecca's journey touched your heart, comment the word courage to show me that you followed this entire transformation. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next incredible stories that I prepare with such care for you. We are a community of good story lovers, and your presence here means a lot to me. Thank you for the coffee, and see you soon.